Biologists are currently investigating a class of compounds that appear to trigger structural changes in the brain's circuitry to treat depression. Current first-line treatments like SSRIs often take 4 to 6 weeks to show any effect, and for about a third of patients, they fail to provide measurable relief. Psychiatric medicine has largely relied on this basic class of medications since the late 1980s. Clinical trials using alternatives like psilocybin and MDMA are now demonstrating rapid drops in depression and trauma scores, often after just 1 or 2 doses. But administering these substances require dedicated clinical spaces, up to 8 hours of direct supervision by trained therapists, and strict medical screening to exclude anyone at risk for psychosis. If we plot treatments on a chart comparing market scalability against neuroplastic efficacy, standard daily pills sit in the high-scale, low-efficacy corner. Traditional hallucinogens sit on the opposite end, delivering high efficacy but limited reach. The highly effective, easily distributable top right quadrant is currently vacant. A treatment that requires an all-day clinic stay cannot easily reach the hundreds of millions of people currently struggling with mood disorders globally. Biotech researchers are now developing a new class of experimental drugs called neuroplastogens. Their target is to induce rapid brain healing without the hallucinatory trip. The goal is to separate the physical growth of new connections from the subjective psychological experience of the trip itself. This strategy has sparked a debate among scientists. Many researchers argue the profound mystical experience is what helps patients process trauma, while others see it as a manageable side effect of the underlying biology. The outcome of clinical trials testing these non-hallucinogenic compounds will determine whether the next generation of psychiatric medicine prioritizes the safety of a take-it-home pill or the psychological depth of a guided trip. To evaluate if a trip-free drug can work, we have to look at how these molecules interact with serotonin receptors to unlock neuroplasticity. Classic psychedelics bind to the 5-HT2A receptor and reach a maximum activation level. As full agonists, they trigger a heavy signaling cascade. This activation triggers a burst of glutamate, which drives both the growth of new neural connections and vivid sensory hallucinations. New neuroplastogenists, like experimental compounds DLX-001 or 5-BR-DMT, are designed to act as partial agonists. They engage the receptor at a lower activation level, reaching the threshold to grow new connections, but avoiding the massive glutamate flood associated with hallucinations. A third approach bypasses the serotonin system entirely. Some compounds are being designed to bind directly to the TRKB receptor, which acts as the brain's primary engine for structural growth. This data from current research shows the physical results. The bars on the left show that even without a hallucinatory response, these compounds physically increase dendrite intersections, indicating that structural neuroplasticity has occurred. While we can see these connections growing under a microscope, the clinical question remains: can these compounds provide lasting relief without the shift in perspective that a full psychedelic journey provides? Pharmaceutical companies are taking 2 distinct routes to bring these growth mechanisms to market. We can map the corporate landscape by looking at exactly how they are sourcing their drug candidates and protecting their intellectual property. Companies like Delix Therapeutics and Transneural are building entirely novel, synthetic molecules from scratch. Engineering a completely new chemical entity allows for precise receptor targeting and clear patents. The trade-off is time. Because these molecules have never existed before, regulators require them to prove from zero that they are safe for human consumption. The competing approach involves modifying the structures of existing natural psychedelics to create what are known as prodrugs or analogs. Biotech firms like Enveric Biosciences and MindMed are taking known substances like psilocin or ibogaine and chemically altering them to remove the trip. This strategy is intended to accelerate the clinical validation process. By starting with a biological base that already has a history of use in humans, these companies hope to reach patients faster. However, taking medicines used by indigenous cultures for centuries and modifying them for a corporate patent has triggered significant ethical debate regarding ownership and access. The market must weigh the potentially faster development of natural analogs against the precision and clear intellectual property of novel synthetic drugs. For patients, the choice between pursuing a traditional psychedelic trial or waiting for a neuroplastogen depends on clinical urgency and individual risk. Traditional psychedelic therapy is currently aimed at individuals in severe, immediate crisis who have the resources and psychological flexibility for intensive, supervised care. It also requires strict medical screening. A personal or family history of psychosis typically disqualifies a patient from the hallucinogenic route. When we map these scenarios, the paths diverge based on the clinical supervision required. The neuroplastogen path is being developed for those seeking a scalable alternative to daily SSRIs, particularly those with risk factors for psychosis or time to wait. But wait times are the current reality. Despite the promising lab data, FDA-approved take-at-home neuroplastogens are still several years away from reaching pharmacy shelves. The sensory trip may be a necessary feature for an individual needing a psychological shift, but it remains a logistical bottleneck for a healthcare system trying to treat patients at scale. From an investment perspective, the field is splitting into two distinct business models. Traditional psychedelics require building physical infrastructure, funding clinics, and training specialized therapists to manage the 8-hour sessions. The trip-free market offers a different potential, a scalable product that could directly compete with the multi-billion-dollar market for standard daily antidepressants. These two research frontiers are now moving forward along parallel tracks toward commercialization. The next major indicator will be which companies, those developing novel synthetics or modified analogs, successfully clear Phase 2 efficacy hurdles with the FDA. The results of these trials indicate that psychiatric medicine is moving toward a broader range of rapid-acting biological options, expanding the toolkit beyond the daily pills the industry has relied on for decades.